What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving a complete breakdown, reaction, analysis, and review of the first episode in Season 2 of the Paramount Plus drama television series, Landman. And just so you guys know, this video will contain spoilers, so if for some reason you haven't gotten around to watching the first episode of this new season yet, and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. Landman is an American-made drama television series created by Taylor Sheridan and Christian Wallace, originally inspired by the podcast series Boomtown, hosted by Wallace. The series stars Billy Bob Thornton as a landman for an oil company. The series also stars Demi Moore, Andy Garcia, Ali Larter, Jacob Laughlin, Michelle Randolph, Paulina Chavez, Kayla Wallace, Mark Colley, James Jordan, and Sam Elliott. The series premiered on November 17th of 2024 on Paramount Plus. And in March of 2025, the series was renewed for a second season, which premiered on November 16th of this year. And at the time of the making of this video, the show has a 78% on Rotten Tomatoes, with its popcorn meter currently sitting at 65%. The series has a Metascore of 60 on Metacritic based on 23 critic reviews, with a user score of 6.9 based on 120 user ratings. And finally, the series overall has an 8.2 out of 10 on IMDb, with over 73,000 ratings. Now, for those of you that have been with me for a while now, you know that Landman is one of my absolute favorite shows on television right now. And I've been very much looking forward to breaking down Season 2, just like I did Season 1. You can check those videos out in my playlist section if you're interested in going back and taking a look at those. But I thought last season, though it started off extremely strong in my opinion, ultimately missed a few opportunities to tell a really transformative story. I think that Taylor Sheridan has neglected both Ainsley and Angela, narratively speaking, and I hope that moving forward he can remedy that, because I don't believe it's too late. Now, last season took place over the course of about 10 days or so in real time, and that's a supremely truncated period of time for a 10-episode, hour-long series, because you almost get to a place where each episode is the equivalent of a single day, which makes each episode a little too close to a real-time depiction, which I think can deprive the characters of the room they need to breathe. It also messes with the audience's spatial awareness as it pertains to the story that they're being told. And when I say spatial awareness, I just mean that if you get too close to each episode being representative of a day, then it can mean overexposure for characters and stuff like that. And you don't really give the characters a chance to kind of be missing from certain pieces of the story because, of course, Tommy sees his family every single day. And so you don't really have the space for the characters to kind of spread out and tell a kind of all-encompassing story, if you get my meaning. All that said, though, I'm eager to see what TS has in store for the Norris clan this season. And now that we've gotten that out the way, let's talk quickly about what happened last season. In Landman Season 1, we watched Tommy, Landman Tommy Norris, navigate the high-stakes world of Texas oil by negotiating a land lease with a cartel, wherein an agreement is reached that neither party will interfere with the other and let each of them kind of go about their businesses uninterrupted. But he faces further conflict soon after that when a stolen MTEX plane crashes into a rival company's oil tanker, which ultimately leads to a giant lawsuit. Now, Cooper, Tommy's son, also started a job with the same company that Tommy works for as a roughneck. But his first day is marred by a catastrophic explosion that ends up killing his entire crew. Now, Cooper survives the accident, but the incident triggers a series of escalating events, including an attack by the brother-in-law of one of the deceased workers. Now, as Tommy tries to balance the company's needs with a failing safety record, his personal life becomes strained by his visiting daughter Ainsley, who, after a breakup with her current boyfriend, decides that she'd rather live with her father in Midland than go back home at the end of her spring break and face her romantic failure head on. She ultimately meets a new guy in Midland, Ryder, who she begins a courtship with, to her father's dismay. Now, after hearing about Cooper's accident, Angela, Tommy's ex-wife, the mother of both of his children, decides to visit in the interest of checking up on Cooper, but she too decides to stay indefinitely and even volunteers to leave her new husband if Tommy would simply have her back. After the accident, Cooper takes an interest in Ariana, the widow of Elvio, one of Cooper's deceased crew members. And this causes Manny, Elvio's cousin, to assault Cooper more than once, which the second time lands Cooper in the hospital and ultimately lands Manny in jail for a parole violation. Now, once Cooper leaves the hospital, he moves in with Ariana, helping her with bills, household chores, and with the MTEX payout for her husband's wrongful death, eventually resulting in the pair becoming a romantic couple. Meanwhile, Tommy begins having issues with the cartel. They harass him and his workers over money and lost drugs, and eventually kidnap him, and they plan to unalive him before he's ultimately rescued by Galleon, a powerful cartel boss, who issues him a last-second reprieve in exchange for Tommy's expertise as he looks into transitioning the cartel into more legitimate business pursuits. And finally, the season ends with the sudden death of MTEX owner Monty Miller from a heart attack. And his death elevates Tommy to president of MTEX Oil, putting him in a powerful position for next season, while also elevating Cammy to full participation as an owner in the same company. Now, episode 1 of season 2, entitled Death and a Sunset, starts with Tommy standing on a balcony at an expensive hotel just before dawn in Fort Worth, Texas, as we hear a newsman's voiceover explaining that crude oil opened at 79 and that heating oil is at 2.22. Now, Tommy is then approached by a waitress and asked if he wants breakfast. Tommy explains to the waitress that he's not much of a breakfast eater. The waitress explains that it's the most important meal of the day. Tommy then asks if she really thinks so. The waitress replies, "That's what they say." Tommy then asks her who says that, and the waitress replies, "Whoever says these things." Tommy then replies, "I'll tell you who they is. It's Kellogg's and General Mills, and whoever makes them shitty little frozen round waffles. That's what it is." The waitress replies, "Eggo, I think." Tommy continues, "Eggo, exactly, which is owned by Kellogg's. The people that tell us that breakfast is the most important meal of the day are the sons of bitches that make the stuff. You think our ancestors had breakfast? You think cavemen sat around a fucking fire eating waffles? No, I guarantee you if they ate breakfast at all, it was probably bone marrow of an impala that they dried out over a fire. But I guarantee you they didn't have cornflakes." The waitress then asked Tommy if he's sure he wants more coffee. And Tommy asked the waitress if they sell cigarettes. She replies, "Not since the 90s. Tommy asked the waitress if they have a secret stash in the back for emergencies. And the waitress replies, "If they do, they don't tell me." Tommy thinks for a moment before digging in his suit jacket pocket, pulling out his billfold and asking, "Do me a favor. See if there's a busboy in the back that might want to go on a scavenger hunt, because I guarantee you that shit right there ain't going to get me through a Monday." So we know what day it is of the week. He then hands the waitress a $100 bill and she walks away, we assume to go find Tommy a pack of cigarettes. Now, this scene is ultimately meant to be a data dump, written essentially to give us information that will become pertinent at a later point in the episode. Chief among them that crude oil opened at 79, right? It's also meant to set the stage for the bulk of the first act, which takes us out of Midland and places us smack dab in the middle of Fort Worth instead. In this scene, we also kind of get reintroduced to Tommy Norris, in case we forgot in the time that lapsed since last season, that he's a man that doesn't do breakfast, something that we saw repeatedly in the first season of this show, and that always has a speech, usually about propaganda and how it's used. This one not being about green energy versus oil, but instead being about the importance or the insignificance of breakfast. And finally, a man who smokes entirely too much. Now, from there, we see dawn break over Midland, Texas. And at Ariana's house, we find Cooper up and at him in the bathroom, preparing for his day. He walks into the bedroom where we find a sleeping Ariana, and he kisses her on the forehead, gently waking her. Now, she remarks that it's early. Cooper explains that he's got a long drive, that it's a big day. Ariana asks Cooper what makes it big, and Cooper replies, "I'll tell you if I'm right." He then kisses Ariana gently on her forehead yet again before walking away as she sits up asking, "Tell me anyway," as Cooper exits the room. He reiterates that he'll tell her if he's right, but Ariana, becoming frustrated, reminds Cooper that's not the way this is supposed to work as Cooper exits the house. Now, this scene is essentially the opposite of the first scene in that it's mainly logistical, right? Here we're just seeing the next phase in Cooper and Ariana's relationship. Here we see them settling into their dynamic as a pseudo-family, right? We see that Cooper has put his plan to become a landman and his own man into motion, and that something will happen today that will either mean he was right or he was wrong. But Ariana wants a tea either way. That's supposed to show us how close they've gotten since we last left off with them. It solidifies that Cooper has officially entered into his provider era as a man, and that Ariana sees him as not just a man, but as her man, and that being LVO's official replacement, essentially a husband in training, if you will. And there isn't very much narrative data given to us at all in this particular scene, though we do get the sense that this scene will lead us to a further scene, in the episode. Now, from there, we see Fort Worth, Texas, now in broad daylight, and we find a hotel ballroom full of people at an expensive-looking luncheon. And we see Tommy sitting in an adjacent room talking to a man named Danny Blanton. Danny explains to Tommy that there's a change of control clause in their contract. Now, Tommy insists that there is no changing control, but Danny continues, "He's effing dead, Tommy, and now his wife runs the company. That's the very definition of changing control." Now, Tommy explains to Danny that he runs the company, that she, meaning Cammie, owns it, and that she owned it before, that she's listed in the partnership, that it's her effing signature next to his on Danny's contract. He continues explaining to Danny that he was promoted from senior vice president of the company to president by the same ownership that he signed with, and that is a chain of progression, not a change in control. He then insists to Danny that if he wants to fight about it, that he should lawyer up, that he's ready to go. Danny, then reminds Tommy that it's a $500 million field, and that he had garbage terms crammed down his throat by Monty, but that he could eat those terms with Monty because he knew that Monty would deliver. He then asked Tommy if he's supposed to sit on shit paper while Monty's trophy wife tries to pull permits from the Railroad Commission. Tommy replies, "You think Monty ever pulled an effing permit in his life?" He reminds Danny that every dime he made with Monty, that it was him that pumped it out of the ground, him meaning Tommy, and that won't change. He explains to Danny that he's 17 wells in on the workovers, that he's cleared to drill 6 on the new field next week. He asks Danny if he wants him to send everybody home while he tries to weasel a renegotiation out of his best friend's wife. He explains to Danny that he'll shut the whole thing down tomorrow, and then he's asked Danny where he wants him to send the $110 million bill. Now, Danny chuckles sarcastically in response before Tommy explains further that he has no play except to trust him or to buy the wells back. Now, Danny asks angrily if Tommy is going to sell him his own leases. Tommy explains that they're not his leases, that they're his until he recoups plus 100, insisting that Danny read the contract again. Now, Danny claims that Tommy might be worse than Monty, and Tommy replies, "You say that like it's a bad thing. Monty made you plenty rich, and I'm going to make you richer." Now, at that point, a waitress walks in and asks the pair if they want a drink. Tommy explains to the young lady that he's good before thanking her. But Danny orders a whiskey double. The waitress then asks if he has a preference on what kind of whiskey, and he explains to her that he couldn't care less. My man's stressed. And as the waitress walks out of the room, Tommy tells Danny to just relax and trust him. Danny replies, "Oh, are we trusting each other now?" Tommy explains that if making money is the goal, then they'd better, before he stands and ultimately exits the room. Now, this scene is the writer simply continuing old business, right? It's essentially another data dump meant to remind us, as in the audience, of something that we saw last season. You guys may remember that Danny is the guy that Monty put the screws to about midway through last season because he needed to be bailed out financially for some bad business plays that he made, but couldn't go to the bank because most of them wouldn't touch fossil fuels anymore, his words. And the entities that would wanted unacceptable terms. And if you remember, Monty asked him in response, "Well, what do you think I'm going to want?" And ultimately, Monty got him to agree to terms that he was uncomfortable with because Monty made him feel like he had no choice. And now that Monty is gone, Danny is trying to renegotiate the terms of the agreement that was reached. But Tommy is having none of it. This is ultimately our chance to see Tommy in his new role as president of the company, which kind of looks a lot like the old role, if you ask me. But it's also a chance for us to get a sense of just how much Tommy is going to have Cammie's back as she assumes her new role in the company. Now, Tommy then walks back into the main ballroom where he's eventually approached by a man named Bob Knowles. Now, Tommy, surprised to see Bob, asks him if the gathering isn't a little below his pay grade. Bob explains that MTEX holds $3 billion in leases and that he doesn't think that's below anyone's pay grade. He then asks Tommy what he's going to do with the gas fields over in Kilgore. Tommy explains that that's pretty far down his list, that East Texas isn't his game. Bob then explains it's not a question of if there's gas. Tommy explains that the fields are good, that he just doesn't want to go out there, that the mosquitoes out there are so big they can F a turkey flat-footed. Bob chuckles at the joke before explaining to Tommy that he can save him the trouble, that he'll give him $300 for them. Now, Tommy explains that they're worth $6 at least. Bob replies, $5 maybe, if they were producing. Tommy replies, "Well, you just said they'll produce." Bob explains, "Well, will is the key word. You've got to drill them first, and you just said you don't want to." Tommy explains to Bob that he spent most of his life doing shit he didn't want to do. Bob then offers Tommy $350 for the leases. And Tommy replies, "What is this, a effing test? I know what they're worth." Tommy pauses for a moment to think before offering Bob the leases for $400. Bob then explains to Tommy that he'll have a contract drafted and over to him in 3 days. Tommy advises Bob to buy bug spray, and he replies simply, "All right." Now, Tommy begins to walk away before Bob stops him again, though, asking if there's anything else he's looking to unload. Tommy explains that he's got some leases over in Louisiana that he can do without. Now, Bob asks Tommy if he's got geothermals, permits, and surface locked up. Tommy explains that they're all bundled and ready to go. Bob tells Tommy to email the information over, and Tommy explains to Bob that he'll do it first thing. Now, Tommy tries to walk away once more before Bob explains to him that everyone is real curious about what she has to say. Again, she meaning Cammie. Now, Tommy explains that he's pretty curious himself. Bob explains further to Tommy that the sharks are circling. And Tommy agrees, explaining that they leave a pretty big weight. Bob remarks that Monty was a gambler who thrived on his intuition, insisting that that can't be replicated, that can't be taught. He then reminds Tommy that they're in a boom, advising that Cammie should sell, pay capital gains tax, and that at the end of it all, she'd still be a billionaire. Tommy explains that he doesn't disagree with Bob's assessment. Bob then reminds Tommy that the room they're standing in doesn't come any tougher, and that if she doesn't win it, if the bank starts calling notes, that her leases will be worth 10 cents on the dollar. Tommy explains to Bob that Cammy is tougher than he thinks she is, and Bob replies simply, "She'd better be," as Tommy finally walks away. Now these scenes, this particular scene is essentially a continuation of the last one, and another data dump. It's the writers continuing the settling of old business and the setting of the table for Cammy to ultimately make her first impression with the people that were involved in Monty's businesses before he passed. And here we learn that Bob's dialogue, through Bob's dialogue, a bit more about the state of the company, which is useful in the setting of the table, like I told you guys, especially for the season, right? Here we see that Cammy's decision last season to keep the company and try to make a go of it has created some pretty high stakes for both her character and for Tommy as well. And we perfectly segue from the dialogue to the inside of the ladies' room, where we find Cammy nervously staring at her reflection in the mirror when two younger women enter, one of them a young lady named Lexi, asking where Tulum is. The other, named Stormy, Stormy Daniels, I don't know, replies, "He had me at 4 seasons." Lexi then asks Stormy, "He wants to leave tonight?" And Stormy replies, "Oh, he wants to leave now, as soon as this luncheon is over." Cammy begins to put on her lipstick as the two young girls continue their conversation. Meanwhile, Lexi Googles Tulum and explains to Stormy that Tulum should work just fine as a vacation destination. She then asks Stormy if she trusts the man taking her, and Stormy replies, "To do what?" Lexi reminds Stormy that the man that they're speaking of is 62 years old. Stormy explains that if he tries something she won't do, that she'll kick the shit out of him, before remarking that she doubts he'll try anything that she won't try, further explaining that the man is going to get the blowjob of his life on the flight, and that she's coming home with a condo in Dallas and a Bentley Continental. And the pair giggle before Stormy finally notices Cammy standing nearby. That was a long conversation for them to just notice the woman standing right beside them, but okay. Tammy inquires about what's so funny, and Stormy explains to her that the divorce doctors convention is one hotel over, that the ballroom just outside of the bathroom is a young woman's game, and that she means no offense. Now, Tammy takes a moment to think before expressing that she's still offended. Stormy replies smartly, "Oh well, that's life in the Serengeti." Cammy again takes a moment to think before she replies, "Thank you, I needed this." The pair of young girls chuckle again amongst themselves, very disrespectfully, I might add, as Cammy turns and leaves the ladies' room. Now, this scene here is a plot device. It's actually meant to be the impetus for Cammy's upcoming speech, a speech that's going to be truly important to the narrative, not only this episode, but to the season. And it's going to, of course, set up the plot for the rest of the season. And ultimately, this is the gas that'll fill Cammy's tank before she goes out and tries to drive her point home, right? Cammy starts this scene seemingly really nervous about the speech she won't have to give. But when the younger girls are disrespectful towards her, she clearly plans to use the younger women's disrespect in order to find the fortitude it will take to convince a room full of mostly men that she's tough enough for them to get behind and continue doing business with as usual. Now, we see Tommy waiting for Cammy outside of the bathroom, and as she exits the bathroom and approaches him, he asks if she knows what she's saying. Now, Cammy explains to him that she indeed wrote a speech, but that she's not quite sure if that's what she's going to say. Tommy explains that she better figure it out fast, that it's her luncheon. He further explains that they have a $500 million in debt service, and that the president of every bank holding that paper is sitting in the ballroom, and that they're looking for any excuse to pull it. He continues explaining to Cammy that they have $700 million worth of leases and loan outs that Monty's death effectively nullified. Now, stick a pin in that, keep that in mind. He then tells Cammy that she better be able to convince them that she's strong, that she's tough, that she doesn't take any shit, that she's not gonna go bankrupt, that that's her motivation. And as the conversation continues, the two young ladies that were in the ladies' room with Cammie both exit, headed towards the ballroom. Cammie then explains to Tommy that that's where men and women differ, that fear alone doesn't motivate them, that they need something else. Tommy then replies, well, you'd better find it, and he follows her to the ballroom. Now, this scene is logistical, and it's also informative, so I guess it's still a data dump. It does a bit of both things, right? This, again, is Tommy doing his job. Here, he's there to support Cammie in the most important moment, even though he doesn't know what she plans to say. And keep in mind, he also gives her last-minute information on the company that she needs before her speech. Another data dump meant for us, the audience, so that we understand the character's motivations moving forward. But I want you to keep in mind that he just tells Cammie that Monty's death nullified a whole bunch of agreements after he told my man Danny Blanton that they didn't. And Cammie here is also kind of woman-splaining women to Tommy here before they head into the ballroom for her speech, which I thought was kind of funny. When she's saying that, women don't operate just on fear. They typically need something else, right? But this is more setting at a table, if not setting the table for the episode and the season as well. So kind of, again, a logistical scene, but also a bit of a narrative one, a data dump as well. Now, upon Tommy and Cammie's arrival in the ballroom, Tommy holds Cammie's purse as she takes the stage. And the first thing she says to the group of mostly men, and maybe some of the mistresses, is that she's heard the ballroom recently compared to the Serengeti, which evokes a bit of laughter from the crowd, except for Stormy, she ain't laughing. She continues, many of you are hunters. You satiate your primal need for conquest by playing the only game in existence where the other team doesn't know it's playing. And again, the crowd chuckles, and Cammie continues. My husband never hunted. He saw no need. The Permian was his savanna, and you were his sport. Kind of disrespectful, but okay. I called this luncheon so I could introduce myself to each of you, to squash the rumors and offer you a warning. I'm a hunter too, and like my husband, I don't use a rifle. We are entering the largest energy boom of this century. For those of you coasting on your royalties, I must point out that while you sunbathe on the beach of Tulum, I will be underbidding your lease offers, cornering pipeline supplies, and buying your bad debt. Underestimating me is how I buy you out. Now, I have no speech on the futures of energy or my commitment to innovative approaches on drilling or philanthropy or any of that other bullshit you guys like to spew at these things. I'm the largest independent producer in the region. The only difference between me and Monty is that I'm meaner. Test me and you'll find out just how much. Enjoy your lunch. I paid for it with your effing money. And at that point, Cammie smiles and walks off stage. And Bob is one of the first to stand in applause, followed by most of the other people in the room. Cammie then approaches Tommy asking, is that strong enough for you? And Tommy asks what motivated that, and Cammie looks over at Stormy sitting next to the man who was supposed to take her to Tulum after the luncheon, and she replies, canceling that little bitch's vacation. And she and Tommy finally take a seat. So here we see that Cammie gets through her speech just fine, seemingly accomplishing the goal of convincing the people who were doing business with Monty to continue, of course, under her, while at the same time exacting revenge against Stormy, the young woman from the bathroom, showing us that the audience that Cammie is not to be trifled with, right? This is the culmination of almost all of the scenes that come before this one. They all basically lead here. This scene was the light at the intersection, and now that light has turned from red to green. Now, next we go out to one of the rigs that we quickly learn belongs to Cooper, my man Cooper. We see the rig workers hard at work as Cooper stands by watching closely. And as the workers continue putting pipe into the ground, Cooper watches a nearby gauge closely. He then peeks into the office and asks, what's our depth? And a man named Marty answers, 5,800. Cooper remarks that they should be in it, so to speak, and Marty explains to him that he'll know they're in it when the pressure valve starts singing. Cooper then steps back outside the office and stares up at the top of the rig before focusing back in on the pressure valve as the workers continue. After a few moments, the pressure gauge reaches over 8,000. Cooper steps back into the office and explains to Marty that they're in it. Marty darts outside the office and tells the workers to back it off. Cooper then looks at Marty and asks for numbers. Marty tells him that he'll get them. Cooper turns to Marty again and replies, "Come on, give me the effing numbers." Marty replies, "Cooper, damn it, boy, let me shut this thing down and start circulating unless you want it spilling all over the effing ground." Cooper waits anxiously before Marty runs back into the office with Cooper close behind. Marty explains to Cooper, "I'd say buy a lottery ticket, but you don't need one." Cooper smiles and asks, "What's our gas kicking at?" And Marty replies, "How's 6,200 a unit sound?" Cooper smiles, tapping Marty on the shoulder before darting down the stairs of the rig. And once he gets down to the ground, he pauses, taking a moment to take in the moment before finally hopping in his truck and speeding away. Roll opening credits. Now, this scene is purely logistical, but it does set up Cooper's season arc. And this is where the scene before was leading to this. The whole, "I'll tell you if I'm right." Now, last season we saw Cooper putting his preliminary plans in place. And now we see him executing those plans and seemingly having some early success, which is meant to show us that Cooper is talented as it pertains to following in his father's footsteps. This is what Sheridan has clearly been writing towards ever since we met Cooper in the very first episode last season. And he explained that he was near a degree in geology at Texas Tech. This scene is likely to also be integral in moving the subplot involving Cooper and Ariana forward for the rest of this particular season. Now, from there we go back to Midland and Ariana's house, and we see her sitting in the baby's room in a rocking chair as she attempts to rock baby Miguel to sleep. She stands up and carefully places him inside of his crib just as Cooper bursts through the front door yelling Ariana's name, ultimately waking the baby. Now, Cooper continues yelling Ariana's name as he throws down his bags and quickly tries to remove his shoes. Ariana rushes out to meet him near the front door, reminding Cooper in frustration that she has a young baby. Cooper, seemingly uninterested in Ariana's statement, claims he has something to show her. Now, this scene is logistical. Its purpose is to simply show us the next thing that Cooper does, which here we see is he goes back home, picks up his lady and his pseudo-stepson, and he plans to take them out to the rig to show them their futures. Now, next we see Ariana, Cooper, and baby Miguel headed back out to the rig in his truck. Now, Cooper parks and jumps out of the truck, rushing over to Marty, asking him where they are. Marty explains, "We're running these chokes wide open. This bee is flowing." And it's at this point that Marty finally notices Ariana and he apologizes for his foul language. He goes on explaining to Cooper, it's a lot of sand and water right now, but the oil ratio is high, real high. It's just ain't a lot of shit in this one. Marty apologizes again to Ariana for his language, but she explains to him that she's both used to profanity and guilty of it, so there's no apology necessary. Cooper smiles and Ariana notices, inquiring, "Well, that's a pretty big smile." Cooper explains to Ariana that he's got a pretty big reason. Ariana explains that LVO never used to get so excited about drilling, and Cooper replies, "Well, he never owned a well." Cooper further explains to Ariana that the well belongs to them, that it's theirs, that it's going to pay for itself in 2 months, and from that day forward, it'll pay them directly. Now, at that point, another of the workers walks by, patting Cooper on the back, congratulating him for striking oil. Cooper thanks the worker before Ariana remarks, "I'm proud of you, mi amor." Cooper remarks to Marty that he doesn't think Ariana truly understands, and Marty replies, "No, she don't," before he starts walking back to the rig. Cooper asks Marty when they level off where he thinks they'll be at, and Marty explains that it's hard to say, but that his conservative guess is 500. Cooper turns to Ariana and explains that the well will produce 500 barrels a day, every day, for the next 2 years, before they even put a pump on it. Ariana asks Cooper if that's a lot, And Cooper explains to Ariana that oil opened at 78.23. Remember, well, essentially 79, but 78.23. He then does the math and he calculates that they'll make 39,000 and change a day, every day, and that 75% of that belongs to them. He explains further, because remember, when he went to negotiate the leases, he gave everybody 25% at the end of last season. But he explains further that the personal number amounts to 29,000 a day, which is 880,000 a month, which is 10 million a year. He then points to another rig nearby, explaining to Ariana that that's the next one. Ariana smiles before asking, "So this is the dream?" And Cooper replies, "This is the dream." Ariana then replies, "You did it." And Cooper replies, "I did it for you." Ariana smiles, resting her head on Cooper's shoulder as he kisses her forehead yet again. Hey, Cooper is the quintessential forehead kisser. My man is on that R&B tip. But Ariana looks happy, but she does look like she may feel a bit guilty all at the same time. And this scene is both logistical and a bit of foreshadowing, right? Showing us what we can expect Cooper and Ariana's future to look like. Keep in mind that Ariana already has enough money to live her current lifestyle probably for most of the rest of her life if she's smart with her money. And now, if Cooper can manage to get her down the aisle, she'll be entitled to much more than that, if you think about it. But this is the writer setting our expectations in order to ultimately either fulfill them or to have something take place during the season that causes Cooper to fall short of fully fulfilling his dream. I don't know which way the writers are going to go here. I don't even know which way I think would be the most interesting. But if you made me pick right now, I would say that to have Cooper, something happen, and Cooper start to kind of have bad luck would probably be the more interesting way to get from point A to point Z. And I think that Ariana here does still feel a bit guilty that her life has basically started to look up, and all it took was for her husband to die. And there she is holding his baby, laying her head on another man's shoulders, calling him Mia Moore. And I think it does bother her that this has all happened a little quicker than maybe it probably should have. Now, from there, we go back to Fort Worth, and this time we're on the campus of TCU, and we see Angela and Ainsley for the first time this season, walking across campus together. Now, Ainsley sees a young man in a TCU t-shirt and gray sweatpants. And as he walks past, he smiles at Ainsley, and she turns to her mother, explaining that he's a football player and that she can spot them from a mile away. Angela smiles and replies, "God bless gray sweatpants. It's like a present wrapped in cellophane. You know exactly what the hell you're getting." Jesus. They then approach the statue of the horned frog, and Angela remarks, "Look at this big old horned frog." Ainsley explains that she thinks it's actually a toad, that it's a horny toad. And Angela explains to Ainsley that it's actually a lizard, that if the administrators or the admissions counselor, asks, that's one of the tricky things she may throw at her. Ainsley asks why they call them frogs if they're actually lizards. And Angela replies, "I don't know, baby. Why do you call a buffalo a bison?" Ainsley asks her mother what a bison is, and Angela explains that it's a buffalo, except it's not a buffalo, that it's a bison. Ainsley asks, "You don't think she's going to ask me about buffalo, do you?" And Angela replies, "I don't know, baby. I mean, it's Colorado's mascot, and every mascot from the Big 12 could be on the table." Ainsley explains to her mom that she'll tell the admissions counselor that she's not majoring in zoology, and so she hasn't really studied most of the mascots. Angela remarks that that's good thinking, and the pair continue on. Now, I won't lie to you, this scene essentially just felt like padding, right? It functions as a logistical scene, a scene meant to show us what Ainsley and her mother are currently getting up to. But the dialogue here is extraordinarily inconsequential. As inconsequential as Tommy's diatribe about breakfast in the first scene of the episode. This scene here just works to show us that Ainsley is now attempting to go to TCU instead of Texas Tech, where she was planning to go after she met Ryder at the patch party last season. Go figure. Now, inside the admission counselor's office, Greta Stidham, Ainsley, as admissions counselor, looks over Ainsley's file, remarking that Ainsley scored a 29 on her ACT. Now, Ainsley remarks that the test was hard, that she was relieved to do so good on it. but Greta Stidham remarks that she wouldn't call a 29 good, more like acceptable. Ainsley remarks that she thought it was good. Greta Stidham remarks that it's fine before noting that Ainsley was top 10 in her class at Aledo. Remember, that's the high school she went to before she decided to leave after Dakota dumped her. Now, Ainsley explains that Aledo was a big school. Greta Stidham then asks Ainsley if she's graduating from Aledo in May. Ainsley explains that she's not, that instead she's studying abroad. Greta Stidham asks if she's studying in Europe, and Ainsley replies simply, Midland. Greta asks Ainsley what precipitated such a life-altering move, and Ainsley explains that it had not rained since she moved to Midland. Girl, bye. Seemingly frustrated with the conversation, Greta Stidham asks Ainsley why she moved to Midland, and Ainsley explains that her parents got back together and that her father lives there. Greta Stidham asks Ainsley if her father is in the oil business, and Ainsley answered in the affirmative. Now, Greta then asked Ainsley if she wasn't interested in tech, because tech would be closer. Ainsley explains that she was accepted to tech, but that she feels like she needs a fresh start. And Greta looks back into Ainsley's file, explaining that it seems like she's been given priority walk-on status with the cheerleading corps. She asks Ainsley if she had planned to cheer for tech. Ainsley explains that she was just going there for her boyfriend, who scored a 17 on his ACT, so he's headed off to junior college in Kilgore instead, and her daddy won't let her go east of I-35 unless it's to shop in Dallas. She then hints that she wouldn't go to a junior college for a boy, that if he was playing at a junior college in the Maldives, she still wouldn't go. And that's kind of sad, if you ask me, given all that Ryder had to go through to impress her last season, and given all that she went through to reward him for impressing her last season. But I digress. So Greta Stidham explains to Ainsley that none of that was what she asked her, that she only inquired why she wasn't planning to cheer for tech, but she is planning to cheer for TCU. Ainsley then explains that TCU doesn't have a policy against cheerleaders dating athletes. Greta replies, "And that was an issue for you?" Ainsley explains that it was, before asking Greta if she would like her to explain her position on the subject. Greta explains that she would be fascinated to hear her position on the subject. So Ainsley proceeds to explain that it seems detrimental to humanity in general that a university would try to keep the prettiest girls from dating the tallest, most athletic boys, who could then get married and make babies that are really, really pretty and athletic, like even more athletic than their parents. She continues explaining that if you breed a lab to a sheepdog, you don't have a lab and you don't have a sheepdog, but if you take two really, really good-looking labs, like the ones from the Wild Rose Kennel at the Dallas Gun Club, then the puppies would be like super retrievers, and she thinks the real opportunities are being wasted with such restrictive policies. Ainsley then starts to become flustered as she apologizes, claiming that she's really nervous, that she can feel the interview getting away from her a bit, but that she really wants to attend TCU and that she already ordered her uniform and the training sweats and the cover-up, but not the white ones now, but that she did get the purple ones with the cute little horned frog in white above the pocket, which isn't a frog at all, it's a lizard. Ainsley then begins to sniffle, asking Greta if she can have a tissue. Greta Stidham then hands Ainsley a tissue that she uses to wipe her eyes before she remarks, "Hybrid vigor." And Ainsley replies, "What did you call me?" Greta explains, when two different breeds of a species procreate, the offspring possesses the strongest traits from both breeds, shattering your argument for the baby factory of quarterbacks and cheerleaders, which is easily the most offensive and elitist statement ever uttered in this office. So offensive, Ainsley, I'm finding it difficult to fully articulate my shock and utter disgust. Ainsley then replies, "Well, that doesn't sound good." And Greta continues, "It's not good. If it were in my power to deny you acceptance to this university, I would do it with an enthusiasm the professors in our psychology department might wish to study. However, as a priority walk-on, you must only meet the minimum requirements, which sadly you do, to gain acceptance. Your application does not go before the admissions board, where I would have taken great joy expanding on all the ways you are an abysmal candidate for this university." Ainsley explains to Greta Stidham that she's using a lot of words she doesn't fully understand. Greta Stidham explains that she's doing it on purpose. Greta goes on to explain that now that Ainsley has satisfied her in-person interview, that her acceptance letter will be mailed in the next 7 to 10 days. She tries to explain to Ainsley that she must register for freshman orientation, but Ainsley interrupts her, simply asking, "Wait, I got in?" Ainsley then stands up, flailing her hands in the air, moving across the desk as Greta Stidham asks, "What are you doing?" Ainsley explains to Greta that she's a hugger, and she leans over the desk, hugging Greta against her will, essentially. Greta then complains about smelling like the beach and gardenias, and Ainsley explains that it's Hermes, that they sell it at Neiman's. She then tells Greta not to buy any, though, that she's going to bring her some on Teacher Appreciation Day. She then beats Greta to the punch, explaining that she knows she's not a teacher, but that she's going to bring her some anyway. She then thanks Greta, referring to her as Gretel. No shit, as in Hansel and Gretel. Greta corrects her, explaining that her name is on the plaque right in front of her and on her door. Ainsley takes notice, remarking that it does indeed say that was a good gift to her. She then thanks Greta and shrieks as she frolics out the door. So here we get a pretty long scene that is meant to serve as character development for Ainsley. It also fills in some blanks for us narratively and sets up Ainsley's season arc in some ways, even though I don't think this is how college works. I mean, I went to college, and I know that it doesn't matter if you play football or whatever. There's still a requirement that kind of has to be reached. And the application's probably still going to go before some kind of admissions board. And even if you're on like the football team and the band, I was in the marching band, you still had to meet the minimum requirements to get into the college first. So I don't quite know why Taylor Sheridan wrote this that way, but I digress, right? Here, we simply watch Ainsley fumble her way through her college interview for TCU, and ultimately we see that she does get in, but not because she's a good fit for the university, but simply because she's been granted priority walk-on status as it pertains to the cheerleading corps, which means that, in all likelihood, someone that her mother or father knows, more than likely it's Angela because this is cheerleading, someone that Angela knows did her a favor once Ainsley decided that she wanted to go to TCU instead of Texas Tech. Now, we see Ainsley arrive back in the lobby as Angela sits there waiting for her, and with excitement, she professes to her mother that she did get in, and the pair share a big hug. Ainsley explains to her mother that the interview was tough, and Angela replies, "Honey, never doubt yourself about anything, even the things you have no chance of accomplishing." Angela then grabs her purse from the nearby chair, and the pair walk out of the building. Now, once they get outside, Angela explains that whether she bakes a pie or she gets someone to bake a pie for her, that she still has a pie either way. And she asks Ainsley if she understands, and Ainsley replies, "I think so." Goodness gracious, God bless this young lady. Angela explains further that she should make what she can make in life and have others to make the rest, that's the key to life. Angela remarks that she can't wait to be as wise as her, and Angela assures her that day is coming. Now, these two scenes are basically logistical, simply showing us Ainsley and Angela leaving the interview, much like the scene that showed us their arrival. And here we see the continuation of Angela teaching Ainsley what I would consider to be all the wrong lessons about life. She's teaching her clearly to be a mini her, a woman that will absolutely have to attach herself to a successful man in order to get through life. And I guess we'll just have to continue seeing how that goes, especially since Ryder's off the table now. So the whole getting married to Ryder, who's going to go to Texas Tech and win the Cotton Bowl or whatever is going on, I guess that's out the window. Now, next, we catch up with Cammie and Tommy on their way to the airport. Now, Cammie remarks that she thinks the luncheon went well. Tommy replies, "And now come the real test. And when they call, and they will call, don't even listen to the pitch. Tell them to call me. And then when they start selling, just interrupt them. Say, 'Let me stop you right there. Call Tommy.'" Now, Cammie remarks that she's not going to learn anything if she keeps deferring to him. But Tommy explains to Cammie that Monty burned a lot of people, that he wasn't dishonest, but he was ruthless. And now the whole world's going to be gunning for her. He explains further that all the bad deals are going to come her way and that all the good deals are going to come to him. And just stick a pin in this particular conversation. I'm going to come back and say something about this in just a second. Now, at that point, Tommy's phone starts buzzing. He looks down at it and sees that it's Cooper. He tells Cammie that it's his son and asks if she cares if he takes it. She motions to him to go ahead. Tommy answers the phone asking Cooper if everything's okay. Cooper, who's still on the road with Ariana and baby Miguel, explains that he needs to see him. Tommy asks him what happened, and Cooper explains to him that it's something good. Tommy replies, "For God's sakes, please don't tell me she's pregnant." And Cooper replies, "Not that I know of." Tommy explains to so they are having sex. So Tommy explains to Cooper that that's one of the things he'd rather he be certain about. Cooper explains to Tommy that Ariana is not pregnant. Tommy replies, well, good. Cooper explains to his dad that he needs to talk to him about business. Tommy explains to Cooper that he's on the way back from Fort Worth and that Cooper should just come to the house. Cooper explains that that would involve having dinner with his mother, but Tommy interrupts him, telling him to just come to the damn house, that he'll be there in an hour, and he hangs up the phone. He then continues to explain to Cammy that if he told Cooper the sun was shining, that Cooper would argue with him that it was the moon. And Cammy replies, gee, I wonder where he got that from. Tommy just stares over at Cammy as they finally arrive at the airport. And as they pull up near the plane, Tommy sees Angela and Ainsley waiting for him, their TCU bags in hand. Tommy gets out of the car before leaning back inside the vehicle, explaining to Cammy that she did real good, that Monty would be proud. He then reminds her that they have a meeting on Friday and tells her not to forget. Cammy thanks Tommy, and Tommy closes the door to the vehicle. And as he approaches Ainsley, she explains to him that she's a horned frog, and she opens her arms wide to give her daddy a hug. And Tommy replies, well, I'll be dog. That means he didn't even think she'd get in. And the pair share a hug before Angela approaches and remarks, look at our little horny toad, before kissing Tommy on the cheek. Tommy then remarks to Ainsley, congratulations, baby. Good job. I'm glad you passed up that public school in-state tuition. And Angela tells Tommy to be proud. He explains that he is proud, but that he was already proud when it was half the price as they board the jet, the PJ. Now, once on the plane and seated, the pilot asks if they have everyone, and Tommy explains to him that they're all good to go. Angela then asks Tommy when he's headed back to Fort Worth, and Tommy explains that he's coming back on Friday, and Angela explains that she wants to come with him. Now, Ainsley interrupts the conversation, asking if they want any snacks. Ainsley always offering people food. For somebody who's skinny mini and whatever, she always, do you guys want some popcorn? Like she just, Tommy explains to Ainsley that they're good. Angela wants to hire a realtor as Ainsley continues to explain to her parents that pistachios are available. Both Angela and Tommy decline the offer. Tommy then asks Angela what they need a realtor for. And Angela asks, do you really think I'm going to stay in Midland while our daughter is at college all alone in some strange city? And Tommy replies, strange city? Hell, honey, she was raised here. Angela replies, I'm sorry you're under the impression that we're having a discussion about this. I will live by my baby. Tommy then just tells Angela to hire the goddamn realtor. He then asks Angela if it's not too much to ask that she doesn't bankrupt him again with some effing mansion that they can't afford and that don't need. Angela reminds Tommy that it wasn't her that bankrupted him the first time. I mean, them's facts. She then explains to Tommy that he is now the president of an oil company and that it's time he start living like it. Tommy explains to Angela that they're on a Gulf Stream, that they're already living like it. Angela complains that they're flying back to their frat house in Midland. Ainsley then asks if she has to wear a seatbelt, and Tommy tells her that she does. Angela remarks, all that shit stopped the moment she got into TCU. Yeah, in 4 years she'll graduate, she'll get married and move away. Next thing you know, I'm a grandmother with tits hanging down to her stomach, and I'm all alone because all you do is work. Tommy remarks that he's definitely going to have to start drinking again just as the Gulf Stream takes off. So in this group of scenes, they're basically logistical, but we do get some useful information, and we see that intriguing dynamics at play here, right? We see that Cammy and Tommy are aligned for now. You know, Tommy got her through this little rough patch, but that there could be some issues moving forward as Cammy wants to actually learn the business while Tommy seems to expect her to simply be a figurehead. And their conversation in the car is the writers putting it out there for us to consider. Here, we also learn that Cammy thinks that Cooper is a chip off the old block, so to speak, which may force Tommy to take a hard look at his son and maybe give him a bit more room to breathe and kind of become his own man. The writers here also show us that Tommy was indeed surprised that Ainsley got into TCU and that he's not exactly looking forward to covering the cost difference that comes with Ainsley foregoing a public school with in-state tuition to the private school, reiterating something that we already know about Tommy, that he wants to be frugal, likely due to him having lost everything once before. The writers also show us here that Angela plans to move out of Midland already after completely overhauling the house there and move back to Fort Worth. And Tommy, upon hearing this, tries to protest, but ultimately gives in fairly quickly, like he always does. And these scenes set up the breadcrumbs that we, the audience, will follow as the narrative continues to unfold this season, essentially. Now, from there, we meet a character that they're calling TL, an old man at the Prairie View Assisted Living Facility, sitting in a wheelchair out back watching the sunset. Now, Denise, a female orderly, approaches, telling the old man that it's time for supper. He replies simply, "Ain't set yet." Denise reminds him that dinner is at 6:30. TL explains to her that he knows what time supper is. Denise explains it had already set this time yesterday. TL replies, "Two things you'll find interesting, Denise. Until the 21st of June, the sun's going to set a little later every day. I could explain to you why, but I doubt you'd understand. The other thing that's interesting is I'm in control of none of it. The sun sets when it sets, and I'm going to sit here and fucking watch it." Denise then tries to wheel TL inside against his wishes, and TL simply stands up, groaning aloud in the process. Denise explains to TL that she needs for him to remain in his chair if he's going to be outside. TL expresses that she'd better call the sheriff then. Denise replies, "Thomas, I need you to sit down. I don't want to tell you again." Stick a pin in that. TL replies, "You're ruining it." And his eyes become glassy as the sun begins to set behind a group of small mountains as Hank, a male orderly, arrives to relieve Denise. And TL remarks, "I'll see you tomorrow." Hank steps behind Thomas's wheelchair and remarks, "Whenever you're ready, TL, your chariot awaits. No rush." TL explains that he's ready, and he sits back down in the wheelchair, and Hank explains to TL that they got a call from a memory care in Amarillo and that Dorothy has passed. TL groans in sadness. Hank explains that she took her afternoon nap and just didn't wake up. TL, now in tears, replies, "I recommend you find a way to die quick, Hank. This dying a little bit every day is," and Hank interrupts TL, expressing his sorrow, explaining that Dorothy is in a better place and that he's sure TL will see her again. And TL explains that if he does, that would mean he's in hell too, as Hank wheels him back inside. But old people be surly, bro. But here we're introduced to a new character, TL, first name Thomas, just like Tommy. So that it's pretty clear that this is Tommy's father. And in this scene, we learn that he's in an elder care facility, that his wife was in another facility in Amarillo, that it was a memory care facility, which means Dorothy likely had dementia. We also see that TL himself is dying, a little each day, he says. This is meant to prepare us to see Tommy's father moving forward this season, and this is likely a one-season character who won't have passed on by season's end, and this is clearly going to be who and what Tommy forces Tommy to reevaluate the importance of family. And I'm going to say this too. When you think about last season and about how Angela and Ainsley were working at the elder care facility and how much Angela talked about how she didn't want to be left in an elder care facility and that, those facilities are where, people send their parents basically to die so they don't have to look at them. So this tells me that Angela is going to be instrumental in getting Tommy's father out of that facility and having him come and stay with them. I can promise you that's coming. Now, from there, we see Cooper arrive at his parents' house. He exits the vehicle and Angela meets him at the front door, hugging him, happy to see him before explaining that he has got to start taking showers. As Cooper enters the house, he explains, "I took a shower this morning." And I will say this, just to divert for just a second, they probably should have showed Cooper when he was getting ready to leave for work. They probably should have showed Cooper in the shower because Angela keeps remarking that he don't take showers. So it probably would have been good for us to just see Cooper taking a shower, even if it's just 5 seconds on screen. But Angela remarks that was 9 hours ago. Cooper sees all the TCU-colored balloons all over the house and Nathan already seated at the table when he walks in. Angela then closes the front door before recommending to Cooper that he use deodorant, asking him how his little senorita puts up with the smell. Now, Nathan interjects, explaining that he doesn't find Angela's comments appropriate to say. Angela explains that senorita is Spanish for young woman, and she grabs a bottle of wine, asking Nate, as she pours him a glass, "Is she not a young woman?" Nate explains to Angela that that is an accurate description, but that there's a hint of cultural appropriation when one is not of that culture. Now, Angela chuckles, claiming that there's nothing like having in-house counsel in the house, right? Now, Tommy approaches Nathan, explaining to him that he's on the wrong side of the calendar for the conversation he's trying to have with Angela, claiming that her cycle is reversed every 28 days. And that's weird, but okay. Angela walks back into the room, claiming that she heard what Tommy said. Ainsley then enters the room wearing her full TCU cheer uniform as Dale walks through the front door. After hugging her mother, Ainsley asks her dad if he likes her outfit. Tommy explains to her that she looks real cute. Cooper asks her what happened to Tech. And Angela explains to Cooper that Ainsley is their little horny toad now. And yes, she is, right? Cooper replies, truer words. Ainsley remarks that Cooper somehow got uglier. Cooper just stares at her before Ainsley asks, did you swallow a soup can? Oh, that's just your Adam's apple. This is so immature, bro, the both of them. Angela then remarks that it's cute how Ainsley and Cooper tease each other. But Dale remarks that it's adorable before Nathan leans over and whispers to him that he's pretty sure they aren't teasing. And Dale replies, oh no, they effing hate each other. Angela then re-enters the room claiming that dinner was a little rushed, but that she had to go by Central Market and they had white truffles. Dale asks if white truffles are like chocolate. Angela explains that it's not chocolate, that it's like a root or a fungus, that it's a mushroom that grows under the ground and you have to hunt for it with dogs. Dale asks if that's what they're having for dinner, and Angela explains that they're having cacio e pepe, which is a pasta with black pepper, Parmesan Reggiano, and shaved white truffles. Dale asks if there will be any sauce, and Angela explains that there will not be a sauce in the way he's thinking, but that there will be melted butter. Angela explains that she can't have butter, but Angela tells her that she can have just a little. Ainsley reminds her mother that she's literally in training, but Angela remarks that she's been a cheerleader for like 6 hours, that she can have some butter. Ainsley reminds her mother that she's not even supposed to have carbs, and Angela explains to Ainsley that she can work it off in the morning. Tommy then whispers to Dale, asking if he's ever noticed that the closer Angela gets to her period, the more complicated the dinner dishes become. Tommy continues, I swear to God, if aliens came down here and rounded us up and put us in zoos, the little spacemen could watch us shit for hours. Like we watch gorillas eat fruit and pick their asses and swing around on shit. They could watch women argue all fucking day. As Angela prepares to make everyone's plate, she explains, excuse me, I'm right here listening to you. Here's what we're not doing. Any of this shit, okay? Our baby is going to college, all right, and we're going to toast her and eat exactly what I put in front of you. Those little aliens won't need a zoo to see the tantrum I'm about to throw because they'll see it from fucking space. Angela then slams the utensils back into the bowl and continues, everybody got me? Cacio e pepe with shaved white truffles on top. At $2,800 effing dollars, the truffle is not optional. Tommy replies, you're shitting me. For a mushroom? Angela begins shaving the truffle over the plates of everyone. She gets to Tommy's plate and he asks her for about $600 worth of truffle. Angela then sits back down and Ainsley asks, what about mine? Angela explains that there will be none for the babies because their palates are too sensitive. I don't even know what that means, but okay. They're essentially both grown people, but I digress. She tells Ainsley that she can have truffle when she's older. Angela then asks Tommy if he cares to bless it. Tommy claims he'd be happy to. Everyone then joins hands and Tommy remarks, dear Lord, please, I beg you to grant us patience. And that's about it. Amen. And everyone begins to eat. And Dale starts to choke. Angela tells him to mix his food together for a bit so the truffle will emulsify with the sauce. Dale remarks to Angela that she said there was no sauce. Angela reminds Dale that she said it was not a traditional sauce and then replies, understood. Angela explains the time that she was thinking of using Stephen Rich. Nathan asks, the real estate broker? And Angela explains to Nate that they'll be buying a house in Fort Worth. Nathan replies to himself, thank you, Jesus. Tommy then explains to Angela that Stephen does ranches. Angela explains that if Stephen can find a ranch, he can find a 5-bedroom house in Mira Vista. Tommy asks what they need 5 bedrooms for. And Angela then replies, what about Cooper and Ainsley when they come home for the holidays? And Cooper has his little baby now. But Cooper interjects explaining that little Miguel is not his baby. Angela continues, well, I doubt you're leaving the effing thing at home, so it needs a room. And what about Ainsley when she has children? I mean, doing the math, I don't think 5 bedrooms is enough. Tommy then explains to Angela that he doesn't think home purchases should be committed to during the current arc of her cycle. This is ridiculous writing. A hush falls over the dinner table, and Angela, seemingly furious, asks, "What are you saying, honey, that I'm incapable of making the decisions when I'm on my period?" Tommy nods his head yes as Angela continues, "While millions of years of evolution have played out in the perfect cleansing of my womb in preparation for your Neanderthal sperm, that I somehow lose the ability to think clearly during the week of this miracle unfolding. Huh? That I am somehow so mentally compromised?" Tommy explains that he never said that before Angela continues, "What do you think I'll do? You mean something crazy? Like take your plate away and throw it against the effing wall?" Tommy explains to Angela that she can have his plate, and Angela replies, "Oh, can I?" Tommy replies, "Yeah." Angela continues, "Oh, thank you, Tommy." She then begins to grab dishes from the table and break them against the wall as everyone else at the table takes cover. She then continues, "Remember the tantrum I promised you? Well, here it is." And she tosses a plate of food against the wall. Cooper, who is hiding next to his father, tells him that he'll call him tomorrow, and he scurries out the door. Angela yanks the tablecloth from the table, grabbing yet another plate, walking it over to Tommy's position and tossing it over his head, breaking it against the wall. And as she stands over Tommy, her hands on her hips, Tommy, on his knees, looks up at her and says, "This is going to sound real inappropriate, but with you sweating like that, before you kill me, I just want to say your tits look great in that little tiny bra. I just thought I'd let you know." Angela glares down at him as she thinks for a moment before replying, "How you managed to say the only thing that could possibly save you?" Tommy replies, "It's a gift." Angela smirks down at him. Tommy smiles back up at her. She then joins him on the floor, and the pair look around the room. Tommy remarks that it's quite a mess to clean up, and Angela replies, "You say that like I'm the one effing cleaning it." Tommy remarks, "A $2,800 mushroom, wow." Angela explains that it's not a mushroom, but a delicacy. Tommy replies, "I was so close to tasting it." Angela takes Tommy's hand, exclaiming, "I got another one you can taste after you clean all this shit up." Tommy asks, "Honey, why don't we just skip the crazy and go straight to the sex we both know we're going to have after the crazy?" Angela asks, "Well, where's the fun in that?" Tommy replies, "Well, then it's just all fun. See? We just do the fun part." Angela takes a moment to think before remarking, "Here's something to stuff in your pipe and smoke when you have some free time. See, you think the pattern is my hormones going wonky before my period, which actually causes me to act irrationally." Tommy explains that he has noticed that pattern, but Angela continues, "I can't control my hormones. You can't control pointing them out to me. You ever ponder that, Mr. Oil President?" Tommy replies, "Well, that's a fresh perspective I had not considered." Tommy takes a moment to think before continuing, "So it's my fault when you start throwing shit against the wall," and Angela replies, "Every single time," as the pair share a few kisses. And at that point, Tommy's phone begins to ring. He answers it, causing Angela to storm out of the room, upset. But then Angela walks back into the room as Tommy explains to the person on the other line that he'll call in the morning before hanging up. Angela tells Tommy not to ever answer the phone when she's kissing him, remarking that somebody better have died. I see what you did there, Taylor Sheridan. Tommy explains to her that someone in fact did die before he walks out of the room, outside the house, out by the pool. Angela follows, asking who died, and Tommy replies simply, "My mother." And he and Angela stand there, watching the sunset. Cut to black. Now, this was a pretty long set piece, and this episode happened to be heavily populated with them, actually. And this scene was simply meant to highlight the Norris family dynamic. Here, we have Angela making a real attempt at domesticity, while Tommy makes fun of her in front of Dale and Nate for her effort. Meanwhile, Ainsley and Cooper rib each other in true brother-sister fashion, even though they're a bit old for it at this point. Angela eventually crashes out until she runs out of steam, and then she and Tommy ultimately reconcile. Much like the first scene in the episode, this scene was that and only that, up until the end when Tommy learned that his mother passed, which was a logistical move, another plot device meant to push Tommy and his father together as we get deeper into the season. Now, in reaction, I don't really think the opening scene of this episode was necessary in the slightest, mostly because we didn't learn a single thing new about Tommy in it. In fact, the only thing of any consequence that we get in the scene is that oil opened up at 79. Well, not quite 79, but the newsman says 79. And if I'm being honest, we could have gotten that information another way, especially given that the very next scene takes us away from Fort Worth altogether back to Midland. Now, I did think that Cammie's speech was convincing enough to do what needed doing here, and I found it mildly satisfying that Cammie took a shot at Stormy, the super thought, because she was doing the absolute most in the bathroom a few scenes before that. So it was kind of good to see her come up, and I don't imagine we'll see Stormy again this season. Now, I thought the scene involving Ainsley and Angela about the TCU horned frog actually being a lizard was absolutely ridiculous and unnecessary. And I'm 100% convinced it was only in this episode to pad the episode's runtime, because this was a shorter episode. It wasn't even 50 minutes. And furthermore, I don't like that Sheridan seems set on making Ainsley sound as stupid as humanly possible, all while simultaneously claiming her to be a genius. In this episode, we learned that she was in the top 10% of her class in Alito. So I'm confused. Is she smart or not? I mean, I know she's spoiled, but she gets away with that part of her personality because she's sweet and, dare I say, extremely charming, right? But her being an unapologetic clout-chasing scuzzbucket, it isn't cute anymore, right? Even if she's just an apple that's fallen right beneath the proverbial tree that is her mother, who is maybe the most immature 40-something on television right now. I don't mean in this TV show. I mean on television, period. And I think that Sheridan has missed a real opportunity last season to have Ainsley learn how to get along without a man for a while. You know, after Dakota dumped her unceremoniously in the pilot episode last season, especially seeing as how Ryder, the new guy, apparently isn't even in the picture anymore this season. But having her change colleges now for a third time since the show has started, only 11 episodes into this thing, after changing high schools, all before she ever graduates from high school, keeping in mind that, again, 11 episodes into this story, we've never even seen her go to a single class yet. But I digress, right? There was a plot point here in this episode that reared its ugly head, wherein Angela explained that she wants to buy a house in Fort Worth, and it's blamed on Ainsley going to TCU instead of Texas Tech, which I think is a narrative mistake. But I don't know if maybe the show couldn't get Tech to agree to let the show be filmed there. So maybe this decision got made for legal reasons, right? And look, that happens sometime, and you kind of have to, go to plan B as a writer, as a producer, and as a filmmaker. So I'm trying real hard not to, to grill Taylor Sheridan's lunch here for having Ainsley end up at TCU instead of Texas Tech, because maybe there's something behind the scenes that happened that we just don't know about. But that's where Tommy and Angela and Cooper spend most of their time. And I think that's where both Ainsley and Angela have the best chance to become more interesting characters, right? If they lived in Midland, kind of away from all the glitz and, the money and all that stuff, right? I just kind of felt like, that's what the story is. So I don't know that I want to see Angela and Ainsley move off back to Fort Worth. I really want Tommy to be around his family. I think that's the heart of what Landman is going to wind up being here. And speaking of Angela, nearly the whole third act of this episode was comprised of a family dinner wherein Angela crashes out, yet again, I might add, for nonsensical reasons. And this might have been interesting if we hadn't already seen this 2 or 3 times last season. Angela literally does this now at every single meal. So it just feels like arbitrary regurgitation from last season. And I'm convinced that, again, the only reason we got this scene is because Taylor Sheridan is saving the season's catalyst for next episode. So we spent the second half of this episode simply treading water. Sheridan had to manufacture something for Angela to do in this episode, and so all he could come up with was another family dinner that doesn't get eaten. And I just thought it was lazy. Now, I'm mildly interested in TL and what his presence might mean for Tommy. I firmly believe that the most interesting arc for Tommy is for him to realize how important his family really is, and for him to ultimately decide to give up the oil business and be down for his family, especially Angela, because she does have a point that, when Ainsley, goes to college, Angela's going to kind of be in the house all by herself. And I think that even if Tommy doesn't quit MTEX, and retire, that he should at the very least quit MTEX and work with Cooper. And that'll kind of make it a family business. And I think Tommy having his dad around and maybe even losing his dad by season's end may shake Tommy up enough to get him to look at life differently. Here's hoping, right? Now, from an analysis standpoint, the writing in this episode focuses on multiple narratives, as is completely normal in this show, with the A story being Tommy helping Cammy get their house in order so that they can move forward with MTEC's business, right? The B story being Cooper striking oil and ensuring a promising future for himself and Ariana, and the C story being Ainsley trying to get into TCU. Now, there are also smaller episode subplots at play, for example, that being Tommy's father and the elder care facility being made to deal with the passing of his wife, Tommy's mother, and this will no doubt come into play as the season moves forward. Now, what was interesting about this episode is that instead of a teaser, which is typical in Taylor Sheridan hour-long dramas, here we get straight away with Act 1, right? That being Tommy passing up breakfast for a coffee and cigarettes, Tommy trying to shore up business in support of Cammy and her new role as a sole owner of MTEX, Cammy dealing with rude young chicks in the bathroom, Cammy solidifying her place at the head of the company in the eyes of Monty's business associates, and then Cooper waking up in Midland and ultimately Cooper striking oil. And remember, the primary purpose of Act 1 is to essentially set up the story. Now, this is where we're introduced to the main characters, or where we acquainted with them, the ones that we already know at least. And in this case, that would include Tommy, Cammy, Cooper, and Ariana. And here we're also introduced to their world as it exists before the rise in action takes us to the climax of the episode, that being the thing that will change everything for them, ultimately moving the season forward. Now, here we should be made to understand the characters' motivations, their goals, and their initial conflicts. In this episode, we see that Cammy plans to shepherd her husband's company forward instead of selling it off its assets for financial gain, which was what Bob had kind of suggested that maybe be done, and financial stability. And we see that Tommy plans to be right there by her side the whole time, something, again, I think will be interesting to see play out. We also see that Cooper wants to make good so that he can succeed in becoming his own man and take care of Ariana, his unofficial baby mama. We also continue with the overall theme of the story we're being told, the themes in the story centering around the oil industry and gas industry, the dirty but necessary nature of it, the conflict between the old ways of life and modernization, like, green or renewable energy, right? The harsh realities of a dangerous working class culture, because, people be taking L's out here on the rigs. We saw that in the first episode last season. And the challenges of non-traditional family dynamics, because, boy, Cooper's in a non-traditional family. And, even Tommy is in a non-traditional family in that he's not married to Angela, I don't believe. I think Angela just left her husband, and they're just kind of like shacking up. The show essentially explores the human cost of the oil business, including its inherent dangers and the impact that it has on the families who choose to work in it. Now, I'll tell you guys that the first act is 15 minutes and 55 seconds. So right there in the sweet spot. Now, the second act starts with Cooper coming home with good news, him taking his new family out to see the rig, Ainsley and Angela arriving on the campus of TCU, Ainsley doing her interview and getting into TCU, Ainsley and Angela leaving the campus, Cammy taking Tommy to the airport, Cooper calling him on the way back from his rig, asking to talk to him, Angela demanding to hire a realtor to buy a house in Fort Worth, and the plane ultimately taking off. And the second act lasts 14 minutes and 20 seconds, again, right there in the sweet spot here for an hour long, given the act structure here. And this act structure not being 5 acts, like a teaser, 3 acts, and then a tag, this structure being 3 acts, essentially. Now, Act 2, again, remember, is about putting the plan in motion. It's typically about trying to implement whatever idea the main character or characters might have and seeing that the plan as constructed isn't working or isn't going to work. Now here, we see that Angela and Ainsley have a plan to get her accepted into TCU. And we see that Cooper has a plan for he and Ariana's future. He's putting the plan that he's created last season into motion, and so far it's going well. Now, Act 3 starts with the introduction of TL at the Prairie View Assisted Living Facility, and it also includes Cooper coming over for dinner, Angela's family dinner crash out special, and ultimately Tommy finding out that his mother has passed. And Act 3 is 15 minutes and 44 seconds approximately. Now, again, in the sweet spot. Now remember, the third act is typically where the characters find their lowest point. In the second act, there may have been some general hope, but the third act shows up and crushes that hope, and a new or evolved conflict takes shape. In this particular case, we don't get a typical Act 3 from a narrative perspective. We also don't get a true episode climax here, unless you want to count Angela going apeshit as the climax. But even if you wanted to do that, I think it's a weak climax at best, and Sheridan absolutely could have done better, in my opinion. Bad screenwriter. Now, overall, I give this episode a 60%, or a 6.0 out of 10 if you're thinking IMDb score. Essentially a D for a letter grade. And I have to tell you guys, this hurt me to give this episode such a low score. But I got to keep it real. I got to keep it 100, if you will, about the fact that T.S. mailed it in on this one. He absolutely mailed it in. And I think the main reason he did so, again, is because he was saving the inciting incident for the season for episode 2 of the season. Now, the first thing that I would have changed in this episode was the very first scene. I would have simply deleted it. It serves no narrative purpose, again, outside of hearing the newsman's voiceover explain to us that oil opened at 79. Also, I didn't like the fact that the show went from Fort Worth to Midland and then immediately back to Fort Worth. It was too much jumping back and forth for me, and it would have been one thing if they had jumped from Fort Worth with Tommy, Midland with Cooper, and then, Fort Worth with Ainsley, but that's not what happened. We didn't get Ainsley and Angela until Act 2. It was just too much hopping back and forth for me, and there was just no real need for it outside of padding the episode's runtime. Again, I think that, Taylor Sheridan was just trying to make this episode just long enough, because for an hour long, you typically need at least 45 minutes. And so I think he was just trying to stretch and trying to get this episode to reach 45 minutes. And, instead, I would have just started the episode in Midland at Ariana's house with, like I said, Cooper in the shower, and then Cooper getting dressed, then Cooper kissing Ariana on the forehead, headed off to work. And then I would have added an additional scene with Cooper actually driving out to the rig, and the newsman we could have heard his voice over the radio explaining that oil opened at 79, right? Problem solved. Now, I also would have made Angela and Ainsley's conversation before her interview much shorter, maybe even relegating it to a short explanation as to why she was trying to get into TCU instead of going to Tech like she planned in the first place. The conversation about the horned frog being a lizard was next level nonsense. And again, I think it was just to pad the episode. It didn't do anything to help us understand Ainsley or Angela, unlike Tommy's, tirade last season about the efficacy and importance of oil to a modern society. The whole versus new and clean energy. That at least kind of gave us some information that was germane to the story we were being told. This was, like I said, this was gibberish. And I would have had Tommy agree to meet Cooper at the Patch Cafe when Cooper called him asking to talk. And stick a pin in that for a second. I wouldn't have had Angela being so gung-ho about moving back to Fort Worth either, especially after all she went through to move to Midland and redecorate the entire inside of a rented house. Or maybe the house wasn't rented, it was the furniture that was rented. But either way, especially since it doesn't look like the move is going to happen anytime soon, because I've already seen pictures from this season where TL is at the Midland house and the Patch Cafe with Tommy. So we know that they'll probably stay put for at least a while longer, maybe even throughout the rest of the season. And if that's the case, why did you even have Angela having a conversation with Tommy about moving back to Fort Worth? It just, again, padding the episode. I wouldn't have changed the scene on the Gulf Stream. I would have just omitted the dialogue about moving back to Fort Worth, but that's just me. Now, as for Act 3, after we meet TL at Prairie View, instead of having Cooper come to the house for dinner, I would have had him meet Tommy at the Patch Cafe. just like I was saying earlier, a few seconds earlier, and actually have the conversation that they were looking to have. Because I absolutely think that that's going to be an interesting conversation. I really want to know what Cooper wants to ask him. I want to know if Cooper's going to ask him for some money to float him or what. But I feel like it's going to be something that's kind of big that Tommy's going to have to consider moving forward. But either way you slice it, I want to know what he needs to ask his dad. And I think that would have been a lot more pertinent than the crash out we got in Act 3 at the house, the crash out we've seen 2 or 3 times already in this show. And finally, whatever the catalyst is going to be this season, and based on the trailers I've seen, it's that Monty was maybe up to some shady stuff, and that will come back to bite Tommy and Cammy, that they're going to be in for a fight that they weren't expecting. In fact, I think that's how Rebecca Falcone is going to make her way back into this story this season, as legal counsel, with maybe Nate for Cammy and Tommy. But I would have had that be the climax for this episode. I felt like the family dinner was simply nothing more than a narrative filibuster. Now, I've only got a handful of predictions here because nothing really happened in this episode for me to be able to sink my teeth into to start talking about what I predict will happen. But my predictions for season 2 here are, I think that Tommy and Cammy will have to clean up some sort of legal mess or messes this season left behind by Monty. And this will be why Rebecca returns to Texas to help Nate help them in dealing with it. Now, how sure am I about that? 99%, right? You can never be 100% sure about anything because I'm not actually working in the writer's room. So 99%. I also think that Tommy and Cammy are going to eventually bump heads, despite the fact that they seem thick as thieves right now. In the car on the way to the airport, Cammy expressed that she wouldn't learn anything if she keeps deferring to him. And it also feels like Tommy maybe expected Cammy to simply be a figurehead for the company and not be a real decision maker because he doesn't think she knows enough about the oil business to make sound judgments without his input. Now, how sure am I about that? 75%. I think TL is going to wind up getting taken out of the old folks' home, and he's going to wind up living in the Midlands house with Tommy and his family. How sure am I about that? 99%. And I think that, and those are basically all of the predictions that I have right now. I mean, I have a couple more, but like I said, I just haven't seen enough yet to really even start to dig into them. So I'll just leave it there. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. Taylor Sheridan is still my favorite television writer currently, and I still believe that he has an interesting story to tell us here in this show. But one episode into this new season, I would be lying to you guys if I didn't make sure you understood that he mailed this one in, and that if he doesn't get it together moving forward, this story is going to go from boom to bust right before our very eyes. But what do you guys think? Have you had the chance to check out the first episode in the second season of Landman? If you have, what did you think about it? What did you think about the dialogue in this episode kind of being essentially chicken scratch? What do you think about Ainsley now trying to get into TCU instead of Texas Tech after leaving behind another relationship? And what do you think Cooper wants to ask his dad? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. You can also now support the channel by leaving a super thanks. If you should be so inclined, I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, feel free to subscribe to my new shorts channel and my reactions channel for additional content. The links are in the description. In addition to that, be sure to go and check out themaskscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. And I'll catch y'all in the next video.